In the words of Pinhead from Hellraiser, there is no good, there is no evil, only flesh. Many of us get our view of good and evil from our upbringing, or the educational system, or perhaps even a religious institution of some sort. We probably also get a great deal of our sense of right and wrong and good and evil from personal experience, based on what is pleasant to us and what is unpleasant to us. You also have to consider that there may be a circumstance which may be good in the short term, but is ultimately not to our benefit in the long run. And inversely, there can also be things which they don't appear to be beneficial in the short term, but ultimately they are to our benefit. So an example I'd like to give is of an encounter I had with a bee recently. So I was reaching for a glass of water, and all of a sudden this sharp pain spawned from my hand. And then I noticed there was a little furry yellow creature, a bee. And so without hesitation, I grabbed the nearest blunt object I could, and I ended that sucker's existence. And of course, being the guy who overthinks things, as I do, I got really philosophical about this. So I was contemplating the perspective of good and evil. So from my perspective, the bee is evil. The bee is evil. From a human perspective, the bee is evil because I was just trying to grab my water, and it inflicted pain and suffering upon me. And from the bee's perspective, it was just sitting there, and this unaware, ignorant human out of nowhere just came and made contact, and the bee did what it was programmed to do. And from the bee's perspective, I'm evil because it was just sitting there and I ended its existence. When discussing good and evil, we have to keep in mind the role that perspective plays. And this isn't to say that there's no morality, everything is relative, everything goes in a postmodern sense, but that when we understand that what may be considered harmful to us may be survival for another person, and what may be survival for us and our own selfish egos may be harmful to another. And with this understanding, we can be more patient and compassionate. Your own self is your own Cain that murders your own Abel. For every action and motion of self has the spirit of Antichrist and murders the divine life within you. There is no entity out there which we can call evil. The ultimate evil and the hardest one to face, and this is the theme of every hero's journey that Joseph Campbell wrote about, the ultimate difficulty that the hero faces is that he has to sit with the evil that's within his own self, his own consciousness, his own being. So we can create an entire identity out of goodness, and for the most part this is good. We want to be decent, we want to be treating others with respect and all that bullshit we learned in kindergarten. But there's a problem with this, and there's limitations ultimately, because if we have this identity around goodness, what happens when we don't live up to that expectation? We feel guilt and we feel shame. And so Carl Jung observed that to be truly virtuous is not just being nice for the sake of being nice, but having a thorough understanding of our ability to be cruel, and then from that place and that understanding, not using it. So, to get a more accurate definition of what is good and what is evil, I've selected a passage from the Bhagavad Gita in which the divine and the demonic qualities are described. Fearlessness, purification of one's existence, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, charity, self-control, performance of sacrifice, study of the Vedas, austerity and simplicity, nonviolence, truthfulness, freedom from anger, renunciation, tranquility, aversion to fault-finding, compassion and freedom from covetousness, gentleness, modesty and steady determination, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, cleanliness, freedom from envy, and the passion for honor. And these are a list of demonic qualities. Arrogance, pride, anger, conceit, harshness, and ignorance. These qualities belong to those of demonic nature. The transcendental qualities are conducive to liberation, whereas the demonic qualities make for bondage. Quote, the passage from the unity of spiritual to the manifoldness of temporal being is an essential part of the fall, is clearly stated in the Buddhist and Hindu renderings of the Perennial philosophy. Pain and evil are inseparable from individual existence in a world of time, and for human beings there is an intensification of this inevitable pain and evil when the desire is turned towards the self and the many, rather than towards the divine ground. When we really get in touch with and understand the nature of how temporary ultimately everything is, it certainly gives a much more enlightening perspective, even though that's such a loaded phrase, but it's certainly I think a better state to be in, where we realize how temporary everything is, so that way we can be mindful of the good times and using the bad times as lessons. Again, and this isn't to say that I perfectly embody this philosophy or anything like this, but from my own observations and my own philosophical takings, I found that it's certainly useful when going through difficulties to understand that it's temporary, and even the good times as well, to enjoy them and cherish them. Covetousness, envy, pride, and wrath are the four elements of self, or nature, or hell, and all of them inseparable from it. And the reason why it must be thus, it cannot be otherwise, is because the natural life of the creature is brought forth for the participation of some high supernatural good in the Creator. These four properties generate their own torment. They have no outward cause, nor any inward power of altering themselves. And therefore all self, or nature, must be in this state until some supernatural good comes into it, or gets a birth in it. Whilst man indeed lives among the vanities of time, his covetousness, envy, pride, and wrath may be in a tolerable state, may hold him to a mixture of peace and trouble. Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but our reality certainly seems to be a mix of trouble and peace, and sometimes quite a bit more of the former. And I'm reminded of a talk which Jordan Peterson gave, in which he describes how in conflicts it's better to aim towards de-escalation and peace rather than winning for winning's sake. Certainly in, say, a much more local case, when we have, say, a romantic partner or someone we live with, it's better to aim towards peace in an argument, because ultimately they have to live with us and put up with us. And so at a national and global level, it's also better to aim towards peace, because we too live in a global community, and other communities and nations have to put up with us. Quote, the crimes which are everywhere forbidden proceed from states of mind which are everywhere condemned as wrong, And these wrong states of mind are, as a matter of empirical fact, absolutely incompatible with that unitive knowledge of the divine ground, which, according to the Perennial philosophy, is the supreme good. This was this week's commentary on the chapter Good and Evil in Aldous Huxley's Perennial philosophy. You can stay updated through all of the platforms in the description. I hope you noticed the new setup that I have here. I look forward to a lot of the future developments and projects with this. And with that, thank you for staying tuned to Focus Shift and all the projects that I do. All right. I hope you had a lovely week. Peace.